I know what you're thinking. Gabe, what are you smoking? Have you seen the news lately? We got mass migration, trade wars, World War III, chaos, confusion, campaign promises not being kept, government corruption, uh, the male loneliness epidemic, so on and so forth. Everything is terrible. What are you talking about? And some other people might look at this and say, well, clearly he's just an accelerationist. He just says, light the fuse, burn it all down, and let's just rip that band aid off, collapse our civilization, get it over with. I'm not in either of those camps because the fact of the matter is, this is the best time in genuinely at least 200 years to be a young man. Hear me out. Hear me out. You'll say, well, Gabe, what are you talking about? I can't find a girlfriend. All the women are terrible. They're all on OnlyFans and they're posting their ass on Instagram and all this stuff, and then all the women are out there going, yeah, these guys are all lazy, unambitious, addicted to video games and weed and porn and all this other stuff. What the heck? How could this possibly be the best time to be alive? First thing we need to keep in mind here: best is a values measurement. It's not an absolute value, right? You can't mathematically say that 5 is better than 4. From a value system, you could say that 5 punches in the face is probably less preferable than 4 punches in the face, and $5 million is probably worth more than $4 million, but it's only the context and the value that you place on those things that even tells you what best means, right? So the reason that this is the best time in several generations for us is because everything is crazy. It's not in spite of it, it's precisely because that. Now I know we've all heard the, you know, tough times create strong men, create good times, create weak men, so on and so forth. We've heard that cycle. It's played out. It's kind of trite at this point and tongue in cheek and kind of meme worthy because it doesn't really explain the full gravity of the situation. But the fact of the matter is, right now, what we have with so much of the world going crazy, so much uncertainty in the economic sector, in international relations, in the dating market, in the church, everything is so uncertain right now. We may say, hey, what's going on here? But there is tremendous, tremendous opportunity in that. And the fact that there is so much upset in the world means that we have exponentially more agency than anyone at our age has had for an incredibly long time, right? We look back at the past several generations, millennials and boomers really didn't question too vocally things like the Patriot Act, which were a horrible invasion of the privacy of private citizens and, mass government surveillance. We've had all of these, back alley deals in the government between corporations, all this stuff, all this corruption, everything that stayed under the radar because it's been able to be disguised with this facade of this mature, nice, ascended population that doesn't have anything wrong with it, and everything's fine, and we can just assume that people are nice and life is going to turn out okay. But now that we're reaching the natural conclusion of modernism, we can see that the entire paradigm that we've built Western civilization on post-French Revolution has been completely wrong. It's made completely incorrect assumptions about human nature, and things like feminism have completely destroyed social structures, the family, communist ideology, right? Another failed system that we now have cold hard data to prove does not work and leads to all sorts of evil. And so the temptation here is to just look at this and say, well, everything's terrible. Oh, well. But you need to realize if you are watching this as a young person, specifically as a young man, but whether you're a young man or a young woman, right? If you're under, say, 40, right? Or, ideally like me, 20s, we are poised on the precipice of everything that's been set in place, unchangeable, the things you couldn't question in the media, the uncontested government overreach, everything. All of these sacred cows that you just didn't question because it was unpatriotic or it was racist or whatever it is, right? all of these paradigms are being broken. And so we have this opportunity right now at this critical moment in history to right the ship and start to correct things in a productive way that doesn't just devolve into complete chaos and lead to the total collapse of our civilization, as has happened in so many other times in history. And the reason I'm so optimistic about this is because as a young man, you have everything to gain here and nothing to lose. You'll say, oh, well, Gabe, I don't have a girlfriend, I don't have a house, the boomers and the housing market, and everything's not fair. Okay, fine, sure. But that also makes you an incredibly, incredibly dangerous player. It's an observable psychological fact that when you are single, both men and women, but predominantly men because, more testosterone equals higher risk tolerance. When you're young, you're unattached, you can afford to be extremely, extremely risky with what you do because you're not impacting your wife, you're not impacting your kids, you're not, having your home foreclosed on if you go broke because you don't have any of those things. And yeah, as an ideal, that is something that we want to, have. We want to start a family and settle down, broadly speaking. And that what that is going to look a little bit different for every person. But the point is, that is an ideal that we're striving for, but we don't have it right now, which means you can make incredibly, incredibly high risk gambles. And if they don't pay off, worst case scenario, you're, eating ramen noodles and Kraft mac and cheese for a while and you got to work and hustle and, maybe you get in some kind of trouble, like, you get yourself really heavily in debt on something that you can't pay off or something. That was a bad gamble, right? But then you learn from it and you iterate. And the fantastic thing about this situation is that you can be wrong and you can be wrong and you can be wrong, but to make it all worth it, the gamble only has to pay off once, right? If hypothetically you could play the lottery on an infinite time frame, you would be guaranteed to win at least once. Right? If you're playing it on an infinite time frame, technically you have unlimited wins. But let's just say, like, you got a punch card. You can put $1 in for every ticket that would normally be worth, I don't know, 20, 50, $100. You'd probably say, hey, that's probably worth it. Have at it. So the fact that everything is crazy right now means that we, as young men, have the opportunity to fill the gap here. And it's incredibly easy, and I've fallen into this in the past, into just blaming the boomers categorically because, let's be honest, they did sell most of our country's values and culture down the river for short-term economic gain. That's just a fact. It's unfortunate, and as a group, they don't have much care for their posterity, which has led to things like the awful housing market and everything. And that's bad, obviously. But it has positioned us at this point in history where we realize what they're doing doesn't work. We know something has to change. And although the government is getting older, the individual citizen is always the person that has the most power, right? The idea of the social contract. You agree to abide by the rules of a certain government, and the dirty little secret of any form of government, whether it's completely totalitarian or a basically libertarian free-for-all society, anywhere in between, that system stops working when people put their foot down and say no. And so it doesn't matter what a bunch of octogenarian, corrupt assholes do off in DC somewhere or your state capital or whatever, if the entire population of your country puts their foot down and says, no, we're not doing this. We, as the police force, are not going to enforce those laws. We, as the military, are not going to do that. We, as the common people, are not going to abide by this. We're not going to accept that. And the only way that they have any power is if they maintain that illusion that you're isolated and that you're alone. And so there's been a very deliberate and arguably effective push to try to make us as young men feel isolated, feel alone, feel like nobody's on our side. And yeah, there are some extreme, fringe cases, and I'm not obviously advocating for that, but the point is, every age in history has been shaped by young men because we have more energy than the old guys. We're not as wise, we're not as in tune with the the cycles of life, the patterns of the world, how things operate. So we can be naive and we can be hot-headed and we can make bad decisions. And that's where the older and wiser guides really come into play, because they can inform us of, hey, that's a bad path. I know what you think you're doing is right, but that's actually going to lead you off a cliff. Go this way instead. It'll be a lot more effective. And so that is where the interdependence of the generations naturally comes into play. If you look even way back in tribal societies, traditionally, as people got older, if you even survived to be an elder, your advice was to be respected because clearly you knew something if you had even survived that long. Now, in the modern era, a lot of this has been misconstrued to say that respecting your elders means taking whatever they tell you at face value without any scrutiny. And it's really ignoring the whole idea of, if somebody doesn't have what you want, don't take their advice, right? If somebody is broke, I'm not going to go to them and say, hey, how do I make $1 million? Because they've got no idea. They might have read all the books and watched all the YouTube videos and seen all the summits and seminars and be close personal friends with this guy that's done it, and they might have some tidbits, but they don't have the practical wisdom to weave that all together into a cohesive unit. So I'm not saying that we should blanket take the advice of the generation, well, multiple generations that have completely screwed us over leading up until this point, but it's also stupid to write off that entire group and that massive wealth of experience. So what we need to do right now is figure out how to orient ourselves, and then as the young men that have the most time, which means the most ability after whatever this current phase of world history is, to benefit from the risks we take, right? We also have the energy to see it through. We don't have anything to lose, and so effectively we can stay in the game forever. It's that old the old wartime thing that we see in all the movies, right? You see it in Braveheart, you see it in The Patriot, all this stuff. They can't get the guy, so they go after his family, they go after his farm, they burn his house to the ground, whatever. If you don't have any of those attachments, you're extremely dangerous, which is bad if you are a destructive person that wants to bring down the civilization and sow chaos and destruction. But at the same time, it also makes you an incredibly effective agent of change in a positive way if you are well founded, you have good morals, you have been uh, shaped and grounded in good conduct and not just looking out for your self-interest, but really, the transcendentals, the service to the true, the good, and the beautiful. And this has always been an undercurrent in history, but I can't think of a single time in the past few generations, with possibly with the exception of 9/11, where the whole nation got together and was like, hey, we're going to go do this thing. Whether or not that was right or justified, we're not going to get into that right now. But the point is, we have an entire generation of young men that are chomping at the bit, that want something to fight for. And if we go back and we look to the Garden of Eden, and I love looking at the Garden of Eden because it gives us some idea of how men and women were meant to operate before sin entered the picture, which is the best frame of reference you can get on a natural level before Christ and the Blessed Mother, right? So pretty important. Adam gets a job from God before Eve is even in the picture, right? Adam's purpose is the first and foremost, and the thing that he's made for. And for the past few generations, for our fathers and grandfathers, and to some extent even their great-grandfathers, after World War II, the world order was established. America was the top dog. Everyone just kind of had to rebuild their economies because America was the only industrial power left in the world. So we really called the shots on everything. And prompted by all the investment into American infrastructure by the government during World War II, right? We became an industrial superpower. The urbanization during World War II caused the rapid growth of cities. And yes, there have been some good and bad effects from both of those. But the point is, there was just this established order, this script, and it was just kind of expected that you're going to go to school, you're going to get an education, you'll go to college if you can afford it, or take out a crap ton of debt, get that degree, and then you'll go out and you'll work and retire, and somewhere along the lines you'll probably start a family and settle down and pay your taxes until you're 65, and then you'll collect Social Security and run out the clock. And you just get this very monotonous, uninspiring existence that you just naturally fall into, because I guess that's just what a man does now. And I'm not saying that's bad. Again, I think, having a family and raising them properly is an amazing ideal to strive for. But it misses the picture, the full picture that includes, what is Adam's job? And with the buffet table of options that was spread before the past few generations of Americans, you could go study law, you could become a doctor, you could be a mechanic, you could do this, you could do that, all sorts of things. It's almost paralyzing because you have so many options, you don't even know how to begin sorting them. And so what you do is you regress into the path of least resistance, which in this case is you just follow the script. Like we said, go to college, get a job, and you just incrementally climb the ladder and make a little bit of money and take your 2 weeks vacation, and probably have some enjoyment along the way, but you're just running out the clock in corporate America, and it's not really anything that's terribly inspiring to you or anything that's really meaningful beyond just pushing paper, but it's just there and it's what you do. And now we're at the point where we're saying that we believe and we can really feel that we're made for more than this. And fortunately, the powers that be that would like to have their say over how we live our lives and take away all our agency pushed a little bit too hard. And the frog realized that the water was boiling, and jumped out. And so now we're kind of flailing around, looking around, wondering what the heck needs to happen. And do we just take a sledgehammer to the foundations of this country and wreck it all and restart? I don't believe that's the way to go. But clearly, the current trajectory is headed for disaster, and so we have to change something. And so we should be extremely grateful that we are the people in this situation that have the blessing of being the ones to really step up and take the reins and say, hey, like, I don't know how this is going to work, but we're going to make it work. Because if you look throughout all of human history, everyone has always thought their time of existing was a disaster. Everyone has been dissatisfied with the state of things. Everyone has thought the world is coming to an end at a certain point. Surprise, surprise, humanity keeps chugging along. Taking some hits, making some mistakes along the way, but for better or worse, we keep going. And so if you're looking at this from the perspective of, hey, things are really messed up, yeah, correct, right? But if you look at any of the stories that we tell ourselves, the heroes that we have are only as great as the obstacles that they overcome, right? If I'm, working out at my home gym and I only have a 135 pound bench press, right? That's like the limit of the weights I have. I can never build up to 225 or 315 or whatever. I need to go to a proper gym that has more weight to put me under more tension and more stress to actually build that muscle and get to that point. And the point stands here as well, right? We are in times that are putting us under extreme pressure, not just with the long-term ramifications, but with how easy it is to get hooked on cheap dopamine fixes and distractions, and to say, oh, well, dealing with a real woman is too stressful and chaotic, and I don't really feel like I'm worth it, so I'm just going to go over here and have a relationship with an AI bot and get my fix that way, and with porn or whatever. And I've just developed this habit of stress eating because I don't really like the way my life is going, but I haven't really figured out what I can do about it. So I'm just gonna binge Netflix and just stuff my face in my free time, right? We have this inherent revulsion to both of those because we understand it's underselling our potential. We understand that we're made to be oriented towards something. And the reason that we romanticize warfare, right? Ever since you were a little kid, right? You're biting your Pop-Tart in the shape of guns and shooting it at your friends, and you're running off in the woods at recess and hitting each other with sticks and all this stuff, right? We want conflict, even though war is just an absolute hell. the reason that we crave it in a sense is because we want to test ourselves. We want to prove that we are strong and we are capable and we can triumph over great odds. And that's why we love the stories that we tell so much. And that's where you get the genre of movies and TV shows that do not appeal to women at all, but guys love them because that's our thing. We put ourselves in the shoes of this, underdog hero, or in the case of like the Reacher TV show, just this absolutely jacked guy that barges into town, refuses to elaborate, beats the snot out of everybody, leaves, or some variation of that meme, right? The reason we crave it is because we want to prove ourselves. And it's easy to sedate yourself, but you're always going to have that little voice gnawing at the back of your head. And so right now, the heat is being turned up in a way that it wasn't for our parents, it wasn't for our grandparents. They were able to quell that nagging feeling at the back of their head because they were making decent money. They could see a decent path, something they could settle for with the corporate ladder and this, that, the other thing. For us, we want to tear up the playbook because none of it's working for us. And again, you can view it as a curse, but consider, because we live in an imperfect world with so many inputs, there are no best case scenarios. You will never create a utopia on Earth. And everyone that has tried to create a utopia, like communism, has become an Icarus of sorts, flown too close to the sun and come crashing down. Because, surprise, surprise, humans are flawed, we're messed up, we're stained by original sin, and we're going to find a way to break things because this world is not perfectible. And so that means there will be faults and there will be flaws, intended or accidental, in any system that we devise, anything that we set up. And so we need to understand the world of right now, yes, a lot of things about it are terrible. A lot of things are great. I like electricity. I like toilet paper. I like clean water. I like not having to worry about getting scalped by some random natives in the middle of the night. At least not yet. Give the country 3 more years to devolve. Maybe we'll get to that point. But the point is, right? There are some luxuries that we have. There are some objectively good things that Western civilization in the past, several decades, several centuries has achieved. And there are some trade-offs and things that have come at that expense. Easy example would be American manufacturing. We got cheaper goods, lower costs of production, lower costs of labor at the expense of basically outsourcing a lot of our national production capability and therefore compromising our self-sufficiency and our ability to actually support ourselves in the event of something like a trade embargo from China, or not getting steel from other parts of the world, like not having the ability to produce our own microchips, our own weapon systems, our own food. America's pretty good on food, but the point stands, right? And so whatever world we pick, we need to understand some of the things that we like about the time that we currently live in will probably have to be sacrificed to reach that world. And if you niche that down into your own life, the same is still true. To get to a situation that you may view as objectively better, however your value system is set up, you're going to have to sacrifice some things in the here and now, right? You're going to have to sacrifice the destructive addictions, probably the poor sleep schedule, the living for yourself, honestly, like living in a very short-term, pleasure-seeking mindset, right? You're going to have to figure out how to build discipline, how to do hard things, stuff like that. And yeah, it sucks. But we all, as men, just have this orientation toward it. We understand that that's part of what we are made for. And we want that fight. Even if we don't want everything that comes with it, we want that opportunity to prove ourselves. And so I want to leave this with this idea, right? Everything is terrible, which gives us an amazing opportunity. Life is just electric right now with the possibility and potential that we have to really reshape the world in a way that has not existed for literally hundreds of years. I would argue since the American Revolution, there has not been such a great upset to the world order as just all the chaos that's happening today. Okay? That being said, don't rely on someone else to come and save you. The great fallacy of the modern American system and the modern Western system says that the government will always be there for you. You don't need to do anything. We're going to reward you for being complacent, being lazy. We can see where that road ends. I'm not a big fan of it. I assume you're not a big fan of it either if you've watched this far in the video. So, for the sake of yourself, your sanity, your well being, for your descendants, for your future spouse, for anyone that you care about in the world and any cause that is important to you, please resolve to not just sit idly by and bitch and moan and complain about how things could be better, but actually focus on bettering yourself. And I'm coming at this from the lens of the dating market, right? Currently single, haven't been dating for about a year. Frankly, I think I'm I'm quite a ways away from really wanting to get back out there. I got a lot of personal stuff I want to get ordered in my own life before I'm kind of broadening my horizons. But I've been looking at a lot of content lately, examining the stark divide in, for example, political differences between men and women, where women are trending more liberal and men are trending astronomically more conservative, right? Across the world, not just in America. And looking at how we have these different expectations for reality and life and what we're owed and all these things. And it's very easy on that front to get blackpilled, to say, oh, well, the guy that was fighting in Civil War or World War I or World War II or whatever, like at least he had his wife to come home to, and I can't find a good woman, blah, 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 blah. I have previously dated an absolutely amazing woman, and I can assure you that the sort of person that you are looking for, that is meant for you, that is going to be a good match for you, is going to be probably at the end of the road, right? Probably past you developing yourself to that point where you're on the same playing field, right? It's not a based trad wife or whatever is not something that you are owed in this life. It's not anything that you really deserve even, but it's something that you can work yourself toward beginning to merit if that's important to you. And again, there are so many things in place right now to try to steal your agency and convince you that you have less power than you do. But again, every change in history, every major change in history has been driven primarily by young men with a lot to gain and a little to lose, making that risk reward calculation and saying, okay, we're just going to send it and see what happens. I plan to be in that group. I have no delusions of knowing how the future is going to turn out and anticipating, like, the new problems that are going to arise and the new world that might come out of this time of upheaval and chaos. But what I do know is, because of how global everything has gotten, this is not about just a town suffering under a tyrannical baron, or a nation that has a tyrant for a king, something like that. This is literally a matter of the entire world, the entirety of Western culture, right? Preserving it. If that's important to you, great. Welcome aboard. If not, okay, but hopefully you still have something that you believe in, something you want to see to the end, and some values that are deeper and more meaningful to you than just short-term enjoyment. Because you can live that life for a little while, but eventually it gets hollow, it gets stale, and you realize you were made for more. So please just resolve to yourself that you are going to rise to the occasion. You are going to become the man that you need to be for your own sake, and again, for the sake of your future spouse and your children and their descendants, your nation, your church, your faith, whatever's meaningful to you. Be the person that you were made to be, because it is the only way that we get out of this mess with an equivalent, or hopefully significantly better scenario, is taking responsibility and sovereignty over our own lives and stepping into that agency. And then if we do that, there's literally nothing short of an act of God that can stop us. Oh, thank you for persevering until this point in the video. Hope you enjoyed it. I really was not sure how this was going to go because this was completely off the cuff. There was no script, just some thoughts boiling around in my head that I wanted to crystallize into a coherent thought, and this is at least vaguely coherent, so I'm pretty happy with it. But please let me know what you guys think. If you want to hear me rant into a camera more, or possibly do more like a slideshow style video in the future, kind of toying with that idea, feel free to subscribe, stick around. I got some past videos on the channel related to cultural issues, things of this matter. So if you like today's conversation, feel free to check those out. And then like, comment, subscribe, uh, follow me on Instagram, and I was gonna do this whole sarcastic spiel about all the places to find me, but I just completely drew a blank with the other social media platforms. So it is what it is. No, but seriously, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time, whenever that happens to be.